Let me tell you, I never thought my Tuesday night would end with the collapse of a billionaire's empire, all because of one sentence uttered by a woman the world never bothered to see coming. That Alistair, the guy with a net worth so high he probably forgets how many zeros he's got, sat in a Manhattan restaurant where the air was so thick with money and ego it'd choke you. He was with his junior execs, two yes-men named Peterson and Croft, all toasting the latest in a long line of corporate takeovers. You know the type: custom suit, a watch more expensive than my car. The kind of guy who talks about loyalty but builds empires on broken promises. For him, dinner was just another transaction. Enter Chloe Washington. She glided across that polished floor with a calm that could freeze the chaos of a New York night. Most folks saw a waitress, maybe noticed the careful bond, working two jobs so she wouldn't drown in debt. To Blackwood, she was just part of the background, until he made the mistake of thinking silence meant weakness. He'd been waiting for water, promised she'd be right there, but that wasn't enough. He looked her up and down, loud enough for his lackeys and anyone within earshot to hear. Can we get some service? Or are you just part of the new diversity initiative? I swear the whole restaurant froze, the sound sucked out of the room. You could hear the tension in the clinking of a wine glass. Most folks would have shrunk away, apologized, maybe even cried. But Chloe, she just stood there, her face still and unreadable. She let his words hang there, toxic as they were. It wasn't just a name. It was a ghost out of Blackwood's closet, a secret he'd spent decades and millions to keep buried. The billionaire's face turned ghost white. Peterson and Croft, clueless but suddenly aware the tables had turned, just stared. The room buzzed with silent questions. Who was Julian? And what did this waitress know? Blackwood exploded, demanding answers. Slamming the table like a child denied a toy. But Chloe didn't turn around. She just finished her shift, untied her apron, and left the floor with her dignity unbroken. Back in the kitchen, her hands were shaking, but her spirit was steel. Outside, Chloe called Julian, the very man Blackwood never wanted the world to meet. 26 years ago, Blackwood had an affair, a child. Julian's voice turned cold. This wasn't just family drama. This was about justice. And Blackwood, realizing his past could finally ruin him, did what powerful men always do. He tried to destroy Chloe. He sent lawyers to threaten her job, called the dean at NYU to try to get her expelled, spread lies about her character. But Blackwood didn't know who he was fighting. A roadmap of Alistair's early crimes. It wasn't long before they uncovered a masterpiece of financial fraud. Pension funds siphoned off, lives destroyed. So they took it to the press. A journalist named Evelyn Reed ran with the story. And when the Wall Street Journal dropped the bombshell, it was like watching an avalanche start with a single pebble. But to deliver news that the empire he built with stolen money was now being transformed by the same people he tried to destroy. The properties were converted into affordable housing. That the worst punishment wasn't prison. It was knowing he'd lost everything that ever mattered. The final act played out in court. Blackwood, a shell of the man he once was, pleaded guilty. Not as victims, but as builders, as the architects of a new future. The Baltimore skyline, once a monument to greed, now bloomed with sunflowers on rooftops, laughter in hallways. Hit like if you believe courage matters, and share this with someone who still believes in the power of doing what's right. You ever wonder what happens after the dust settles? After justice makes its mark and the headlines fade away? That's the question that kept circling in my head long after Alistair Blackwood's empire burned down. The city moved on. The story doesn't end at a courtroom or in a garden of sunflowers. Life, as always, finds a way to complicate victory. 6 months after Blackwood was locked away, Baltimore's Old Harbor looked nothing like the war zone it had been. New families moved into the repurposed condos, startups took over the glass towers, and the sound of children playing replaced the echo of deals whispered in boardrooms. Chloe and Julian. Well, you could say they became local legends, but honestly, that didn't make the days any easier. The truth is, winning a war doesn't mean you get peace. It means you inherit the battlefield. Every day brought new battles. Tenants arguing over rent policies, claiming that justice for some meant payback against others. Chloe, who once fought to be heard, now found herself blamed for every bump in the road. Too strict, too soft, too ambitious, too idealistic. You know how it is. Folks are quick to build heroes, but they're even quicker to find flaws when the halo slips. It didn't help that the shadow of Blackwood still loomed. His old associates, the ones who survived the crash, circled the edges like sharks. Rumors started about foundation money, about Julian's conflict of interest, about who really benefited from the changes. There were nights when Chloe stared out the window, watching lights flicker on across the new community, and wondered if she was strong enough for the storm she'd unleashed. Let me back up a sec. This isn't the kind of story where the good guys ride off into the sunset. Real life's messy, eh? One of the twists came from a place nobody saw coming. A woman named Madeline, once an accountant for Phoenix Development, showed up at the foundation's doorstep. She had documents, stacks of ledgers that didn't match the official records, and a story of her own. Turns out, not every skeleton in Blackwood's closet had been dug up. Some of his offshore accounts, meant to hide illicit money, were still active, now under the control of new, faceless shell companies. The fraud ran deeper, spreading like roots under the city. And here's the kicker. Madeline wasn't looking for redemption. She was looking for leverage. She wanted protection, maybe a new life, and in exchange she'd turn over everything. Julian, always the optimist, wanted to trust her. Chloe, though, had learned that justice isn't just about what you can prove. It's about who you can trust when the stakes are sky high. The foundation suddenly found itself thrust back into the spotlight, this time with federal agents banging on their door, city politicians demanding answers. Word got out that he was working his old contacts, promising favors, leveraging secrets he'd kept hidden for years. The press started hinting that Blackwood was planning an appeal, claiming prosecutorial misconduct based on evidence withheld during the initial trial. Evidence Madeline now offered. It was all legal chess, but in the real world. Every move sent ripples through Chloe and Julian's carefully rebuilt community. One evening, Chloe found herself sitting on the steps outside her apartment, just breathing in the city night, smells of fried chicken, car exhaust, distant laughter. Julian sat beside her, quiet, his hand finding hers. "You okay?" he asked soft. She shook her head, let out a bitter laugh. "Some days I think we just painted a new target on our backs, Julian." He nodded, not trying to fix it, just being there. That's love, you know? It's not always fireworks. Sometimes it's just surviving together when the world's got your number. Then came the bombshell, leaked audio of Blackwood on a prison call, implicating powerful names in City Hall. Old deals that could topple more than just his reputation. Suddenly, the foundation wasn't just fighting for its future. They were protecting people, families. The very idea of justice in a city tired of corruption. Madeline, the whistleblower, went into hiding, her safety now tied to whatever secrets she still held. Community meetings grew tense. Some folks accused the foundation of bringing trouble. Others said, "Let the past die, just give us a home." But Chloe stood her ground, sometimes with fire, sometimes just with that tired, determined stare. She started every meeting with the same line. "I can't promise you we'll fix everything, but I will promise you this. No one's buying us out, not ever again." Julian pushed forward with a new partnership, bringing local activists and even a few ex-Blackwood employees into the fold. He believed, maybe stubbornly, that the only way to heal a city is to share power, to let the people who were once voiceless run the show. Frank Miller, the old firefighter, was elected to the board. His first act to demand total transparency. No more secrets, not from anyone. It all came to a head at a public hearing. The night rain pounded the city so hard it felt biblical. Protesters outside. Police everywhere. News vans lined up for blocks. Inside, Chloe faced a grilling. About money, about Madeline, about whether the foundation was any better than Blackwood's empire. She didn't have all the answers. But when a young mother stood up and told her story, about finding a home she could finally afford, about her son learning to read in the new library, about the way neighbors now watched out for each other, you could feel the room turn. Sometimes justice isn't about grand gestures. Sometimes it's about small mercies, tiny victories that add up. And that's how the second act closed. Not with a bang, but with the stubborn, steady work of building trust again. Out in the rain, Chloe and Julian hugged Frank, soaked to the bone, laughing because sometimes surviving is all you can do. The community didn't magically unite. The scars were still there. But for the first time, People started believing maybe, just maybe, the soil was good enough to grow something lasting. But don't think for a second that means the story's over. Blackwood's lawyers are still filing appeals. The city's power brokers are shifting, nervous. Somewhere, Madeline's watching, waiting to see which way the wind blows. The battle for Baltimore's soul is far from finished. You tell me, is justice ever really done? Or do we just keep fighting, one broken system at a time? Let me know your thoughts below. If you think real change is about showing up, about holding the line when it gets ugly, hit like, share,